In front of us were 8 sperm whales that were fleeing for their life, and every time the harpooner got ready to fire, I would maneuver the boat and block his aim. We will one day be able to communicate with whales, and I'm not too sure we want to hear what they have to say about us. But actually eating fish is far more harmful than eating meat. We're insane. As a species, we're completely insane. To most animals, we're basically Nazis. Actually, I call it aggressive nonviolence. But I'll tell you what, if you find me a whale that disagreed with what we did, I promise we won't do it again.
Hello, and welcome to the Viva podcast with me, Issy. I'm joined today by Captain Paul Watson, who has campaigned over his 50 years for the animals, for the environment, and for human rights all across the world. I'm here today to talk about his book. He's just released it, and it's called Hitman for the Kindness Club. It's an incredible book that documents his adventures across the world, his challenges, the successes he's had, and also all of the encounters that he's had with the animals. Thank you, Paul. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, I've been reading this over Christmas, so it's been my Christmas reading, so it's been lovely. And it's been insane to read the adventures you've been on. It's incredible. I wanted to start from the beginning and speak to you nice and easily about why you've dedicated your entire life for the animals. I'd love to hear more about why that's your life purpose.
Well, it all started when I was 10 years old. I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada, and I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers. So every day I was with these beavers and had a wonderful time. And the next summer I went back and I couldn't find the beavers anywhere, and I found out trappers had taken them all during the winter, and that made me quite angry. So the next, that fall, when they began to set the trap lines, I would find the trap lines, walk the trap lines, free the animals, and destroy the traps. And I guess I've been doing the same thing ever since.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that chapter or essay in your book, I was like, that's incredible. It's you've been doing activism since you were a child. One of the stories that really hit me was, and I guess this comes with your love of sea life and stuff, is, the fishing, when you were releasing the fish when you were out fishing with your dad. I think that just really tells a story that you had that compassionate heart from young, which is amazing because children are so empathetic. I read in your book a variety of those stories, including that beaver story, but I wondered if you could tell me a bit more about the one about the animals that you saw waiting for slaughter. I think you saw some cows waiting for slaughter. I wondered if you could tell me a bit about that and the memory of the stories in your own words, obviously.
Yeah, when I was 13, my mother had just died. My father moved us to Toronto, and we were living in a place called North York, which was, we were only about 2 blocks from what was Canada Packers slaughterhouse. It's not there anymore, but back then it took up quite a bit of space in the city. And so you go down there and you see them driving the cows across the road to slaughter. I remember they had this thing called a Judas cow, and this cow would lead the other cows every day. The same cow, they didn't kill this one, it just led the other ones into slaughter, and that was pretty shocking to me. But one weekend, a bunch of the boys and I went down, and because they said that you can get in there because there was no watchman or everything, and we could ride the cows. And so we did. We got on the cows, and I fell off, and I was in this pen, and there must have been about 30 cows in the pen, and they could have stepped on me quite easily, but they didn't. And I found out later that cows will not deliberately step on anybody. I mean, a stampede is different, but just then they wouldn't. And anyway, so I was able to get up and uninjured, and then I also got chased out of there by a watchman who did come by. But it really gave me an insight into how these animals were treated. We saw a lot of, dead pigs or dead cows. Sometimes they'd die, and they'd just leave them there for a couple of days before they would come and clean away the bodies. I don't know what they did with the bodies. But it was that kind of exposure to that slaughterhouse that really, contributed a lot to my concern for how animals are treated.
Yeah, and obviously Viva's an animal campaigning charity, so we talk a lot about how animals are farmed and to stop animal agriculture. So the reason that I wanted to talk about that is to talk about if that changed any dietary habits in your, or if you'd already made those dietary changes already.
Well, back then, of course, this is in the 50s, and, it was very difficult. I mean, you could actually tell the poor kids in our hometown in this fishing village, because we were the ones who went to school with lobster sandwiches on homemade bread, and we, tried to trade them for bologna on Wonder Bread or peanut butter or something. It was a strange thing, but it wasn't until, the early 70s that I became understood, vegetarianism. And in 1979, I made sure that our ships, all the crew had to be vegetarians. And then in 1999, we changed that to all the crew had to be vegans. Now, that didn't mean you had to be vegan to be on the ship, but you had to be vegan well on the ship. And it was my way of introducing people to something that they weren't familiar with. And many of them, finding to their surprise, they didn't die on a vegan diet after a couple of months, and then, in fact, some of them felt that they were a lot healthier. Now, ever since, I've always felt that that's the best way to introduce people to veganism, is to give them that experience. And when they're on the ship, they don't have any choice; they have to have vegan foods.
Yeah, I was looking at your crew sign up when I was researching for this, and I was seeing it said offered 3 vegan meals daily, and I was like, yeah, it is such a good way to introduce people to veganism that maybe care for whales or dolphins, but don't understand fully that care should connect to other animals as well. So I thought that was really, really cool that you do that. So back to the book. So your campaigning's obviously it's so broad. There's so much in here, which is amazing. I kept looking up and being he's achieved so many different things here. So I wondered if you could tell me which one really stands out for you, because I know there are a few stories that you repeated in other interviews and stuff, but I wonder if you could tell me which story really stands out for you.
Well, actually, the title came from the fact that when I was very young, I was a member of a group called the Kindness Club, and that was started by Ida Fleming. She was the wife of the governor, the premier of New Brunswick in Eastern Canada. And when I was in 25 or so after the first seal campaign that I led for Greenpeace, driving back through Eastern Canada, I stopped in Fredericton and visited Ida Fleming. And she then said that I had become the hitman for the Kindness Club, and we thought that was pretty good. So she thought it was a fun title. So that's why the name for the book, really, on that. But it's really hard to say. I mean, all of these were one campaign after another every year, evolving from when I was very young until, today. And so I think the funniest one was when we, I volunteered to help get some rabbits out of a farm that was raising them for laboratory research. And this is the first time I ever did an animal liberation sort of thing. And I offered to drive the car, and we covered up the headlights and we drove in, and everybody else went out and got the rabbits, and I was ready to get out. And we were driving back to Los Angeles, and it was a spring break, and we stopped in a rest stop near Palm Springs, and so everybody could use the bathroom. But what we didn't know about these rabbits, first of all, they were big rabbits. They weren't just little rabbits. And they had taken them out of the sacks that they had brought them into, and they were all running free in the back of the van. And the first thing these rabbits did was start having sex. And so the van was rocking and rolling, and there's 2 police officers are coming by because of all the students that were there. And one of the police officers said, well, what's going on there? And I didn't want them to look in there, and I wasn't aware that anybody had reported what we did. So I said, oh, well, we're making this film. It's called Rascally Rabbits. And so we got these rabbits, and we're taking them to L.A. to this film site. And they got out of control, and they're humping each other. And they said, really? And I said, do you want to look? And the police officer said, no, that's okay.
Yeah, that is funny. When I read that, I was like, that's quick thinking. That was really good. It was funny. And I like that the other activists just were like, yeah, he knows what he's doing. This is good. Yeah, I thought that really was a really nice story. But there was that other one about there was the first whale encounter that I remember you reading about, that you've talked about multiple times in other interviews about. You probably be able to explain it far better than I will, but that one sticks out.
My experience with the beavers was where it began, but where it really solidified what I was doing the rest of my life was in June of 1975. And I was with Greenpeace at the time. I was first officer on that first Greenpeace voyage, and our idea was to get between the harpoons and the whales. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we figured that nobody's going to risk killing a human being to kill the whale. And so Bob Hunter and I found ourselves in a small little boat in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel that was bearing down on us at full speed. And in front of us were 8 sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner got ready to fire, I would maneuver the boat and block his aim. And that worked for about 20 minutes, and till the captain on the Soviet vessel came running down the gangway and screamed into the ear of the harpooner, looked down on us and smiled and brought his finger across his neck. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, this horrendous explosion, and the harpoon flew over our head and slammed into the backside of one of the sperm whales, a female in the pod, and she screamed and rolled on her side. I didn't even know whales could scream, but that's what she did. And she rolled on her side. There was blood everywhere. And suddenly the largest whale in the pod, his tail came out of the water, slammed the water, and he dove. He swam right underneath of us and threw himself at the bow of the Soviet vessel to defend his pod. And they were ready for him with an unattached harpoon, and the harpooner pulled the trigger, hit the whale point blank in the head, and the whale fell back in the water, thrashing about in agony on the surface. And as he did, I caught his eye, and suddenly he dove again, and now I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming really fast towards us. And he came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move would to come down and crush us. And as he rose up out of the water and I looked into his eye, an eye the size of my fist, I could see my own image reflected in that eye. I saw something that really changed my life forever, because I saw and felt understanding. But more importantly, I could see the effort that he made to pull himself back, and instead of crashing down on us, he pulled himself back and he began to slide back into the sea, and I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. He could have killed us and chose not to do so. So personally, I'm indebted to the fact that I was alive because of that. But as we sat there in that boat and the sun was going down in the midst of the Soviet whaling fleet, I said to myself, why are we killing these whales? I mean, the Russians didn't eat them. Sperm whales are killed for sperm oil and spermaceti oil, which is highly prized for high heat resistant machinery. And one of the things it was mostly prized for was in the construction and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are destroying this incredibly beautiful, sentient, self-aware, socially complex being for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it occurred to me, we're insane. As a species, we're completely insane. And I said to myself, I'm not going to do this for people. I'm going to do this for them. So 10 years later, after we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet, I was approached by a former colleague in Greenpeace at the International Whaling Commission meeting, and he said, what you did in Iceland was despicable and unforgivable. And I said, yeah, well, so what? And he said, well, aren't you concerned about how people in this movement look on you? I said, no, not really. I didn't sink the ships for you or Greenpeace or anybody else. We sank them for the whales. But I'll tell you what, if you find me a whale that disagreed with what we did, I promise we won't do it again.
I mean, yeah, hit the nail on the head in terms of, like, I feel like what every animal rights activist wants to envision, but I know that's not everyone, but that's what everyone, I guess, sets out to do. That story, when I read it in your book, really hit me, because, you know, people say over and over again that fish aren't sentient, they don't feel, they don't have emotion, so therefore it's okay to eat them. But that in itself is clear indication that that animal had sentient feelings, that, you know, they stirred you. So, you know, that's something incredible that even in their dying moment, they decided to spare someone who was trying to help and save them. That's incredible. So the question kind of like linking onto that, like we have a lot of pescatarians that talk to us, and, you know, a lot of the time they're like, you know, they're on their journey to veganism or to reducing harm in their own little bubbles. But obviously there's so many studies now, including that one of your own experience of fish being sentient and feeling pain. What's your stance on the fishing industries and your reason why everyone should be vegan?
Well, of course, whales aren't fish; they're mammals. But my experience with fish has been very a lot of revelations there also. But I can tell people who say that they eat fish but they don't eat meat that actually eating fish is far more harmful than eating meat. And I'll tell you why. Is that 40% of all of the fish that is taken is actually rendered into fish meal and fed to animals on factory farms, to chickens and to pigs and to domestic salmon on those salmon farms. So even when you're eating a hamburger or something, or bacon, you're eating fish. So it's very, very destructive that way. But from my experiences with fish, they have memories. They have, like for instance, mahi mahi. They mate for life. If you kill one, the other one will die. I mean, fish are just like, they're all individually different. Their behavior's all different. So you can't say just fish. You have every species has to be looked on completely differently because they're all unique, and they all can't sustain the kind of exploitation. For instance, a salmon takes 4 years to become sexually mature, and then it dies. An orange roughy takes 45 years to become sexually mature and can be living to 200 years. So it cannot sustain that kind of exploitation that, say, the salmon can. That's why the orange roughy fishery sort of collapsed in the 1990s. And almost every single commercial fishery is now in a state of collapse because we've overfished the ocean. And we've taken the food literally out of the mouths of puffins and seagulls and penguins and whales and other animals. And what we're doing is causing the extinction, mass extinction of life in the sea. One of the things that most disturbs me, and which the average person is completely unaware of, although it affects each and every one of us, is that since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And phytoplankton are these aquatic plants that provide up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. The forests of the world provide only 30%. And why is phytoplankton being diminished? Because we have diminished the populations of whales and fishes and seabirds. And all of these animals provide the nutrient base with the phytoplankton, the magnesium, the iron, and the nitrogen, which is provided by the feces of all of these animals. So they're really the farmers. They're farming a crop called phytoplankton. So it's a relationship between aquatic plants and aquatic animals that makes for a living ocean. I'll tell you right now, if phytoplankton goes extinct, we die. We don't live on this planet without phytoplankton. And it's as simple as that. So that's why I say all the time, if the ocean dies, we all die. But unfortunately, over the last few thousand years, we've developed this perception of reality, which I call anthropocentrism, which is, it's all about us. It was all created for us. Everything revolves around us. And that's going to really be the end of us, because our survival depends upon the three laws of ecology. The first is the strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. And the second is the law of interdependence, that all of the species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. And when one species steals the carrying capacity from others, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence, which leads to ecological collapse. We cannot live on this planet by ourselves. I got a call a few years ago from a reporter, Brett Hume, I think his name was, from Fox News. He said, "Did you say at a talk that birds and trees and worms and whales are more important than people?" And I said, "Yeah, I said that." He said, "How could you say something so outrageous?" Well, because they're more important than people, for the very simple reason they can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We do not live in a world without trees and bees and worms and whales. It's as simple as that. They are ecologically more important than we are. We've got to get rid of this idea that we're some sort of superior being that lives on this planet and presides over all other beings. We're not. In fact, even ourselves, I mean, we think, each of us thinks individually that we're a sentient being, but we're not. About a good 60% of our body isn't even us. It's about 1,700 species of bacterium and viruses and everything, which are essential for us to be alive. So each and every one of us are actually a symbiont community of living things. And that really illustrates the law of interdependence.
Yeah, that was your 3 laws of ecology that you used in Captain Paul's foundation, right? Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. Like, I was reading up about them, and it's so true. And the fact that we do put ourselves at the center of everything, obviously, just because we're intelligent enough to build the society that we have, although are we that intelligent to build a society that's now destructive? I don't know, it's a two-pronged argument there.
We think we're intelligent. Really just a bunch of overly conceited naked apes who've become divine legends in our own mind. I had a debate with a whaler from Norway one time, and he says, "But Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. How do you say such stupid things?" And I said, well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are. And he said, well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. The fact is, as a human beings, we measure our intelligence through hand-to-eye coordination, the ability to make and use tools. If a blob of protoplasm stepped out of a spaceship in front of us with a ray gun in its hand, no argument, it has to be intelligent. We don't understand non-manipulative intelligence, the intelligence of other creatures. The whales and dolphins have brains far more larger and far more complex than our brains, but they don't need tools to survive. They can communicate over long distances underwater. They don't have to have all of those material things that we need to survive. They're uniquely adapted to their environment. One of the things that I've said for the last 30 years is that we will one day be able to communicate with whales. And of course, a lot of people laugh at that. But just 2 months ago, in the Bering Sea, scientists actually broke through and communicated with a humpback whale. And they were able to have a short conversation. And the whale understood what they were saying. And so I believe that now, and I've said this for years, that with computers and now with AI, that we will be able to learn how to communicate with whales. I'm not too sure we want to hear what they have to say about us, but I think that that would be a major revolution in our society if we could actually communicate with another being. It's interesting that this experimentation is going on through SETI, that is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, because their reasoning being is, well, one day how are we ever going to communicate with an extraterrestrial intelligence? But when we have terrestrial intelligences right here that we can actually try and do that with. And it seems to be on the verge of a breakthrough.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. That's really interesting that that's happening. I didn't know that was going on. I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of like how we see ourselves and how we are valuing ourselves in terms of like in the ecosystem of the world. And I think it's really important that we do address that, but also if we did have to communicate with animals, like what would they be saying about our treatment to them? I think they'd be shocked. So.
Well, to most animals, we're basically Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that.
But anthropocentrism, I think, is a real problem. Every major religion in the world is anthropocentric. Every major religion says we're the center of everything. It was all created for us. I actually created a church, my own church, which is called the Church of Biocentrism. It's not a religion in a way. It was a way just of looking at things. And the idea is to understand that we have to be interdependent with all other species and that we're not above, we're actually equal. In many cases, we're not even equal to some other species. But that's the idea behind the church. And people say, well, why do you call it a church? And I say, well, it seems to be what people understand, is the idea of a church. Now I just have to write the Bible, I guess. But I'm trying to talk in ways that people from anthropocentric cultures and religions can understand. But really, all of our religious beliefs, and this is controversial, but I think all our religious beliefs are delusional. They're completely unrealistic as far as our relation to the natural world is. I mean, there are millions and millions of species of plants and animals on this planet, and it wasn't all created for us. In fact, I would say if you took the entire history of the planet and put it into 1 year, then we were here for the last couple of seconds of that year. So, it's like Mark Twain once said, if there's a piece of paint on the top of the Eiffel Tower and that piece of paint thinks that the Eiffel Tower was built just to accommodate that piece of paint.
Yeah, we are a tiny little splodge on that. And like animals, I mean, sharks have been around. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know my history very well, but I know sharks have been around a long time.
450 million years sharks have been here.
Yeah, we are killing so many of them with hunting for shark fins and stuff. I wanted to speak to you a little bit. I mean, you've already kind of talked about phytoplankton and stuff, which is really, really important. I want to kind of revisit that because obviously oxygenation of the world and everything, we talk about deforesting the Amazon all the time. That's like we talk about all of these issues with like trees and stuff, which is obviously really important. Deforestation is horrendous. But what do you think can be put in place to stop the destruction of phytoplankton?
The most insidious threat to the future of this planet right now is about to begin in 2025 or 2026, and that is the beginning of deep sea mining. Now, on the bottom of the ocean, especially the Pacific Ocean, there are literally billions of these potato-sized rocks. Now, these rocks take about 200 million years to create. How they're created is, say, a shark fin or something falls down to the bottom. It accumulates cobalt and manganese and nickel, and it builds up into these rocks over 200 million years. The plan is to go down and mine them, to pull them up and extract that carbon. There's actually more minerals in these what they call manganese nodules than there is to be found on land. Now, the problem to pull them up, you have to suck them up through these, from the bottom of the ocean. And in that process, you're dropping literally millions of tons of sediment back into the sea, which can take anywhere from a year to 10 years to settle again on the surface. But not only are you destroying the ecosystems where they are when you pull them out, but now as that sediment begins to fall, it begins to absorb oxygen, therefore starving all those benthic creatures of oxygen that are living there. You literally it's like deforestation of the ocean. And it will cause actually more damage than deforestation. But we are such a greedy species that we don't care about that, because we only think in terms of 5 years, 10 years. We don't think about the impact of 100 years, and certainly not the impact of 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years. But it's all about, in politics, it's all about the next election. In business, it's all about the next quarterly report or whatever. Just keep those shareholders happy. What happens 20 years from now? Not our problem. That's somebody else's problem. And that's our mentality. It's a very ignorant and actually very stupid mentality, but that's what drives us on that.
Yeah, we're very short-term focused. It's silly, because we have to think about future generations. And if we're thinking about our children and our grandchildren, then we shouldn't be thinking short-term. We should be thinking long-ish term.
You should be. You say we should be thinking about future generations, but very small number of people think about future generations. I was talking to a fisherman in Alaska one time. I said, if for no other reason you protect the fish in order to protect your industry, the fishing industry, so maybe your sons and daughters will be involved in the fishing industry. Not that I support that, but they are always trying to argue this with him. And his answer to me really illustrates the problem. He said, well, my mortgage is paid in 5 years, and after that, I couldn't give a damn. Why does somebody like that have children? Well, it's because it's what you do, And here's the problem. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Idiocracy, which it really illustrates the problem. People who are intelligent enough to know that the world is overpopulated are the ones that are choosing not to have children. And the people who are having children are basically pretty stupid. So I always said that the ultimate responsibility of a parent is to ensure for at least 18 years nurturing, loving education, all of that. And if you can't do it, you have no business bringing a child into this world. But you need a license to do everything in this world: own a gun, fly a plane, whatever like that. But you don't need a license to have a child. Even a pedophile can have a child. An alcoholic, drug abuser can have a child. I mean, it's insane that you can do that. And these 90% of the children that are being born are being raised without education, without loving, without nurturing, and they become part of the problem. They don't care, or they're just completely ignorant. I don't know. But, because I get criticized because I have 3 children. One of them's older, and two young boys, 7 and 2. And people say, well, how can you bring children to the world? I said, because I've got an obligation to make sure that they are loved, taken care of, and educated. And so if people brought 6 kids into the world and were able to fulfill that obligation, that's far better than having 1 or 2 children that you just don't give a damn about and grow up to be pretty part of the problem. And so I think it's not all black and white in that sense, It's a difficult decision, but I think we have to have at least some children being brought in this world who are going to be a hope for the future.
Yeah, I was going to say the vegan and antinatalist movement are so close together because of that very argument. And like there's also the counter argument of like vegans and people who are ethically minded should have children because they are bringing in a generation who are kind of with their eyes open and hopefully have those ethical mindsets at heart. And I mean, you're seeing more and more campaigns, like university students and school students, like campaigns coming out left, right, centre, which is amazing, which are campaigning for either plant-based systems or environmental issues. And it is really good to see that the younger generation is doing more, which is great. But I mean, it is still a very tricky decision as an individual to make. I know it's something that I think about myself as a personal individual. It's tricky. But
well, yeah, it's an awesome responsibility, and you have to be able to accept that responsibility. And but we've come a long ways as far as being vegetarianism, veganism. In 1970, nobody knew what a vegan was. From the planet Vega or something. I remember in 1980, people were shocked because I would order an omelet instead of like a steak or something like that. And now, of course, we've evolved beyond that. But it's amazing how far we've evolved over that short period of time. I mean, I'm living in France. In the 1970s, you could not find a vegetarian restaurant anywhere, and now they're everywhere. I was down in southern France a few years ago, and I said, "Oh, you got veggie burgers on the menu. It's great." And he said, "We had no choice. All these Americans and British coming in here, and all they order is French fries." So, it's the consumers that are putting the pressure on them. If there's a demand, then these restaurants and stores will meet that demand, and that demand is certainly there. So I mean, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of vegan restaurants in Paris and much every city in the world right now.
Yeah, I went to Paris on holiday this summer, and honestly, like, I was shocked by just like how many options I had, because in my head I was like, France is not going to be very vegan, I'm going to live off bread. And it was amazing. Like, it was so good. Like, we found some vegan restaurants here and there, which was incredible. Like, it was such a surprise. And I mean, that is like you said, like, the demand is there, which is amazing. And I wondered if you could kind of talk, I mean, you've sort of already mentioned it, but I wondered if, like, from your personal experience, because I know some vegans that have been vegan 20 plus years, like 30 plus years, and they had to like raid a health shop to get like soya milk. And I wonder if like your experiences have changed massively.
Well, any store here in Paris, the grocery stores, you got wheat milk, rice milk, you got almond milk, you got coconut milk. I mean, it's all here, really. So, I mean, again, that stuff was pretty much unheard of back in, it's even in the 90s, it was very difficult to come across. So that's been a major evolution.
Yeah. And it's good to see that that's coming, because it means that, the demand, like you said, the demand's there that will then eventually impact society's like thoughts and like what we should be doing in the future. And then hopefully that can push into politics, into like, other changes. And maybe we could have a plant-based future where people are not fishing seas or land. Fingers crossed. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but we shall see.
Slowly we're recognizing that, especially factory farms, the killing of 90 billion animals every year is a major contributor to groundwater pollution. They're a major contributor to dead zones in the ocean, the major contributor to climate greenhouse gases on that. And so we have to really, and also it's a major contributor to zoonotic transmission of viruses. Every year on these factory farms, they literally they kill millions of animals, just put them to death, because of the danger of viral transmission, whether it be pigs or chickens. And right now with avian flu and everything, incredible numbers of chickens and ducks and things are being killed. It's like they have to keep a lid on the petri dish, which is incubating all of these viral problems. And that, I think, is one of the major problems. In 1995, Laurie Garrett wrote a book called The Coming Plague. And in it, she predicted the emergence of things like hantavirus, West Nile virus, Ebola, all of the things, including this COVID virus and everything like this. And it's going to become worse and worse. And added to that is the melting of the permafrost, which is unleashing viruses which have been entombed for 50,000 years. We're looking at some major obstacles coming up in the future. The more you deteriorate the ecosystem that you're in, the more you disrupt it, the more problems you're going to cause.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines that I think I got from your book, that the more you kind of like make a change, even if it's well-meaning, you can affect so much. Like, everything has a balance, and well-meaning people opting for like paper straws over plastic straws to save the fish, but still eating salmon, that kind of vibe. But
Well,
yeah,
a lot of these things are just to make you feel good.
100%. Yeah. I've even seen pasta straws now. I mean, that's a that's a real.
Well, actually, I don't know why the word straw comes from.
No, tell me.
The straw.
Oh, is it as in
Straw.
actual straw? Oh wow.
Actual
Oh
straw.
wow.
That's what they use. And these things, these styrofoam things they call peanuts. That's because the original packing material was either popcorn or peanuts.
Oh, wow. Nice little nugget of news there. That's interesting. I wanted to talk to you about tactics because obviously Viva is a charity that we focus a lot on like individual change, but we'll also target kind of like corporations, organizations that do anything. We do investigations, all that kind of stuff. But I wondered if I could speak about a difference of tactics because obviously your tactic has always been over the years aggressive direct action. I wondered if you could kind of explain what that is. And
Actually, I call it aggressive nonviolence because we've never done anything violent. We've never injured anybody, but we have intervened and shut down literally hundreds and hundreds of illegal operations. We live in a society, however, where property is more sacrosanct than life. But if you go up to a man who's about to shoot an elephant and you pull the gun out of his hand and break the elephant gun, they would say that that's an act of violence. But to me, that's an act of nonviolence. You're saving a life because life must always take precedence over inanimate objects. You cannot commit an act of violence against something that is not alive. And especially if that object is being used illegally to take life, you have to again, it's all about our values. Imagine walking into the city of Mecca and spitting on the black stone. You will not get out of that city alive, and nobody will have any sympathy for you. Go into Jerusalem, start hacking away at the Wailing Wall, and you're going to get an Israeli soldier's bullet in the back, and nobody will have any sympathy for you. But we go into the most beautiful cathedrals of the world every day, the rainforests of Amazonia, the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, and we totally desecrate and destroy these cathedrals, and how do we respond? Protest letters, picket signs, but nobody actually gets angry about it because we're so alienated from that reality. We are so much involved with things that don't really exist, angels and demons and gods and whatever, things like that. That we fail to realize that we're living in heaven. We've always lived in heaven. We don't have to believe in some place better than this because there is no place better than this. But what we are doing is we're turning heaven into hell.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm not religious, so I'm going to agree with that statement. But I was going to say about the tactics. I think there's such a variety of tactics out there, and I don't think any tactic's wrong. I just think it's wrong for the individual, and it's just like what you are like. I always think activism is utilize your strengths as an individual, and if you're a good speaker, go and you're an amazing speaker, so go and speak. If you're a really good writer, go and write loads of essays. Like it's just utilizing those skills, and that's why I think we should be working closer together with other organizations so that we complement each other and can hopefully get to a winning scenario.
I've said that for years, that the strength of an ecosystem is in diversity, therefore the strength of a movement is in diversity, and people really have to find out what are you good at, what are your skills, what are your talents, and then put those to use to making this a better world. And again, as you said, it could be, the approach could be education, it could be litigation, it could be legislation, it could be direct action. It's really what you're good at. If you're a writer, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever, it's what you're good at. And people should work together on that. And I think individually people can work together and do work together. The problem that you have is in organizations. That's why I set Sea Shepherd up to be a movement, not an organization. But unfortunately, that movement got hijacked by people who wanted to turn it into an organization they could control. But organizations are really a problem because, first of all, they're all in competition with each other, for the charitable dollar or whatever. And everything gets hammered down into bureaucracy and minutia and everything. And so real imagination, real change comes through the passion, the imagination, and the courage of individual peoples.
Yeah, your stories are incredibly brave, and just the people on your crew and the people you've worked with are amazing people to put their bodies a lot of the time between, you've faced like the Soviet ships. I feel like you've faced loads of other countries as well. You've been chased by loads of boats all over, and I think direct action's amazing.
Well, to do what I do and what our crew do and everything, you have to have one other thing, and that is an adventurous sort of spirit. uh, we've been shot at, we've been rammed. I think one of the most dangerous things we did, in 1981, we invaded Soviet Siberia to get evidence on illegal whaling operations. And I think the reason we got away with it is that nobody had done that since World War II. We were the first people since World War II to invade the Soviet Union. We landed on the beach in Siberia. There were 2 Soviet soldiers there when I landed. We stepped out of our boat and we proceeded to film everything for 45 minutes. And these soldiers did nothing because who else could we have been but Russians? We had to have been Russians. And finally, when we were getting to go back in the boat, I had a photographer and a crew member, and they got in the boat and I was pushing it out. And one of the soldiers, a young guy, they were both very young, he came over and he pointed at the boat and he said, "Что это? What is that?" I said, "Это Zodiac." And he said, "No, it's the Mercury, the outboard engine." And then he said, "American." And my response to that was to turn my back on him and push the boat. And I said to the 2 guys in the boat, "What are they doing?" And he said, "Well, he's taking down his rifle." And I said, "Wave and laugh." And that's what they did. And that confused him. And he turned and ran up the hill to get support. And we got back to the ship, thought we got away with it. And then about an hour later, 2 helicopter gunships came out of nowhere, big red stars on the side, and started strafing us with flares and trying to stop us, but we didn't. And then shortly thereafter, a huge Soviet frigate come up and pulls up alongside of us, and they're putting their flags up trying to stop us. And finally, the guy gets on the radio. He says, "Siege over stop your ship before prepare to be boarded by Soviet Union." I said, "We don't have room for the Soviet Union. We're not stopping." And we kept going. And they didn't know how to deal with that. That's the thing I found out with navies over the years, and we've confronted the Norwegians, the Portuguese, the Canadians. They don't know how to deal with no. They're so used to intimidation being the what works for them. So when you say no, they're like, "What do we do?" You know, in Norway, I mean, they fired over top of us with their deck gun. They fired in front of us. They dropped 4 depth charges underneath of us. They rammed us, and then the guy was going to put a shell into our engine room. And I said, he said, "Clear everybody out of your engine room because I'm going to put a shell into it." I said, "No." And the crew lined the deck. I said, "I got 13 journalists on board here, so go ahead, shoot." And he said, "I have it from the highest authority in Norway to do whatever it takes to stop you." I said, "Well, then do whatever it takes." He said, "If anybody's killed, it would be your fault." I said, "No, you're pulling the trigger. It's not going to be my fault. You go ahead." And of course, he backed off.
Is that right, that's the one that you weren't actually in Norwegian waters? Is that the right story?
No, we weren't. We were inside their economic zone. We weren't inside the 12-mile limit, though.
Nice.
Actually, they tried to say we were, but I triggered the EPIRB, which is the alarm system, which was picked up by the U.S. Coast Guard station in Iceland. And at the trial, they said we were. And I said, "Well, here's where we were." It was recorded by the United States Coast Guard office in Iceland. And they said, then they tried to charge me with illegally setting off an EPIRB. And I said, "No, it was set off you were attacking us." And he said, "Well, we weren't in danger because even if we had sunk you, we were there to rescue you. So why would you have put in a mayday if the Navy was right there?" I said, "Because you were our enemy, not."
But they were shooting at you. That's so silly.
Yeah, well, the charges were dropped. We won the case, but we go into court, and we follow up a lot of these things, end up with court cases, but we've won every one of them.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's so much power in going on trial and actually being like, holding your hands up and being like, "I know I've not done anything wrong. Let's put this type of whale hunting, animal farming, whatever, on trial," because that's what is at the center of the trial.
Yeah.
You've gone on trial for a few things. Do you mind talking about one that stands out that you feel was really, really pivotal to bring to trial?
In the Mediterranean, off the coast of Libya, we cut the nets and released 800 bluefin tuna, and they got away. They were fishing illegally, and I never thought anything of it until a year later. My ship was arrested in Scotland by the British, and they said that for damage to private property and theft of property, the tuna, and I had to put up a bond of £750,000 to free my ship until it went to trial. And at the trial, we won. But the Japanese who were involved with this company, their lawyer said, "Well, we'll just throw money at it until we win." And they brought us to the Court of Appeals, and they won. And then we took it to the Supreme Court, and then we won. And they had to pay us £1.5 million in damages. But you just have to be prepared to fight it through. And these lawyers are horrifically expensive. but you have to use them. It's like when it comes to legal issues, I say, and lawyers, I say, get the biggest gun in town. That is, I mean, I was arrested in Newfoundland for chasing the Spanish and Cuban drag trawlers off the Grand Banks at Newfoundland. And everybody in Newfoundland hates me because of what we did to protect seals there. So I'm going to go on trial in a province where everybody hates me, and it's a jury trial. So I called up my friend who's a lawyer in Vancouver. I said, who's the best damn lawyer in Newfoundland? He said, well, Brian Casey, he got those priests off on the orphanage scandal. I said, really? Well, he's my guy. And he was an artist. He went before the jury. He says, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, we're not going to say we didn't do what we're charged with. We're going to say we did exactly what we're charged with, and we're proud to have done it, and we're going to do it again. That was our opening case, and we won the trial.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think there's so much strength and power to do that, because at the end of the day, what you said at the beginning, that you're there for the whales and the sea creatures, you're not here for humans. And I don't think we should be here for, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that human society is functioning and everything, but we don't want to put that on top of like the lives of other sentient beings. And I think that's incredible, and it takes real strength and guts to go to court, I think, because it can be long.
Well, also you have to use humor. In that case, I think that the newspaper in Newfoundland said everybody at the trial was under a great deal of stress except for the defendant, who appeared to be having a good time.
Well, that's good. I think, yeah, like it. Then that's the tip. Then make sure you have fun on trial.
Well, one of those that was funny. They thought they had me in the Japanese court, this case in Seattle, because I had to at that point say that, well, I had stepped back. The ships were not under my control. And because I didn't want to endanger the other directors, shouldn't have done that. But anyway, what happened? I got into court, and they pull out an email who I sent to one of our ambassadors, who was Pamela Anderson, and where I referred to my ships. And he says, right here, you refer to your ships. And I looked at the judge and I said, this is Pamela Anderson. I'm trying to impress her.
I mean, who wouldn't?
The judge laughed, and that was the end of that.
Perfect. I mean, yeah, that's a dream. I mean, it's incredible how many battles you fought in terms of the human side of things, but also like the animal, like for the animals inside. One thing that I took away from the book, and like the main thing that I took away from your book, is your use of the media. Like every single campaign, every single investigation, every single thing that you did, you involved the media. Why is the media so important?
Well, we live in a media culture. The media defines what's real and what isn't real. That's why I've said the camera is the most powerful weapon that's ever been invented. If it's not on camera, it didn't happen, really. No matter what you say. But again, it's the media defines reality. I was a communications major in the early 70s. One of my visiting professors was Marshall McLuhan, who was like the guru of communications at the time. And he actually said, the medium is more important than the message it conveys. So it's more important to understand how the media works. There's warm stories and cool media and hot medias and everything. And when people say, you guys are just a bunch of media manipulators, yeah, sort of like when you're selling Coca-Cola or running for president. Really? You don't do anything in this society unless you try to manipulate the media to work in your favor. And I say there's only 4 elements to media anyway. Every single story has one or more of these 4 elements. And if it doesn't have one, it's not a story. If it has 4, it's a super story. And that is sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. And you have to put that all in there. I discovered that when I took Bridget Bardot to the ice floes off Newfoundland in 1977, that guaranteed us the cover of every major magazine in the world. In 1984, when I led a campaign to protect wolves in British Columbia, we had the violence of them shooting wolves, the violence of the threats against us. We had an environment minister who was taking bribes from a big game hunting organization. So we had the violence and we had the scandal, and I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson. Now, at this meeting, the reporter said, what the hell does Bo Derek know about wolves? I mean, she knows nothing. This is ridiculous. I said, yes, but if I had David Beck or Gordon Haber here, the 2 foremost biologists in the world on wolves, be an empty room, nobody'd be here. But I guarantee this story will be the front page of your newspaper tomorrow. You'll write it, and the editor's going to give it a headline, right? And that's where it was, because you can dictate where your story is being that way. And it's all about really just understanding how the media works. And they cannot resist drama. When I sold the Whale Wars story to Animal Planet and Discovery, I went to them and I said, and I went to all the networks. And I said, the biggest show on Discovery right now is a bunch of men going into a cold and very hostile environment to catch crabs. I can give you men and women going to a colder, more remote environment to save whales. It has to be more compelling than catching crabs. And that's why they took it on. It was the most successful show on Animal Planet for 7 or 8 years. And it could have been bigger, but I refused to go along with what they wanted. And the reason Deadliest Catch was so successful, or more successful than ours, is because I didn't want to get into the drugs and the domestic violence and all the other shit that they had in that show. I mean, they kept trying to put us into positions where we would fight against each other, and I just refused to have the crew get involved in that. And if any of them did, then I would dismiss them from the crew because I didn't want that kind of thing. And they said, well, it could have been a super big show. I said, yeah, but do we really want that image?
And it ruins like what you've got on your ship and everything. Like, I don't know if that's always the best thing long term anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's changed a lot with social media? Because social media is kind of, well, it's not taken the place of the media in terms of the press, but it definitely has a larger reach.
What social media made me understand, because I used to be a journalist, and what social media made me understand is the value of editors, because who knows what's true anymore? Anybody can put anything out on social media, and there are just so many contradictory messages and that, and I think that has caused a serious perception of reality, because what is it? Well, what is true? People say, well, I said, where'd you hear that? I heard it on the internet. Oh, wonderful. Must be true.
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, there's so much. I mean, it's easier. Like, there are so many lies about veganism on social media because someone decides to like screenshot something and then it all goes out of control. But it can obviously also be such an amazing tool for like campaigning, and just like the reach in different countries and stuff, which is incredible. Just probably one of my last questions to you, hopefully a positive one, fingers crossed. But I wanted to ask, in your kind of almost 47, 50 years of campaigning, have you seen major changes, and what are the biggest changes that you've seen in terms of how people treat animals?
Well, the major change, which is what I already spoke to, is the rise in veganism, vegetarianism, then veganism. That's been revolutionary and has been global. So that is the most significant change, I think, there. The problem is overall is that the world is dominated by governments and corporations who care nothing except for money, and that hasn't changed at all. So that's very disturbing. And one piece of advice to get people to get depressed or pessimistic, and I say, well, you don't need to do that because you don't have any power in the future. Don't be concerned about the future. Your power is in the present, and what you do in the present will define what the future will be. So focus on the present. Don't worry about the future. What will be, will be. Que sera, sera.
Yeah, que sera, sera. Yeah, it's all about controlling your own little bubble and doing the best you can do. Cool. Okay. Alrighty then, Paul. So thank you so much again for being on here. I just wanted to show once more that this book is here, and they can buy it on the Captain Paul Foundation website. Is that right?
Yes. It's also on if you're lazy.
If you want to be on Amazon as well, it's also there. But there's plenty of other stuff to read up on Paul's website. So I don't know if you want to kind of give us your links, just read out the links or tell us where to find you.
You can find it just the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. That should lead you right to it. And also I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all those other things. But the website is on the Captain Paul Watson Foundation.
Nice. Okay. All righty then.
And when people say, well, why do you name it after yourself? It's because Sea Shepherd was taken away from me. I had to have a name that they couldn't take away from me.
I in my head, yeah. I mean, that's politics, isn't it, really? But I think it's great that you've got something that's going to be out there inspiring people to get involved. And obviously there are the options to join the crew, which you can join on the website. Are there volunteer options elsewhere so people can like run stores and stuff? Is that also?
Oh yeah, so shore volunteers, and we have one ship, 2 small boats, and we're looking at getting the second ship. So we're building up our Navy again that was taken away from us.
But yeah, so last little like hook. read the book. It's all of the adventures of Captain Paul. Thank you so much for coming on here.